Thanks for joining us for Stable Stories. Stable Stories is a video series that explores the behind-the-scenes stories of builders pioneering in the stablecoin industry. Today, we have Para, Nitya, and Aditi. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
We're excited to jam. So there's a little bit of a lore. We collabed a little bit on some events. We collabed on trading some marketing and go-to-market strategies. So we might unpack some of that in this conversation, but kind of starting off things with some of the basics of stable stories. So just out of curiosity, what was the first interaction with stablecoins? If you guys have individual stories or even a story that encompasses the company, please do tell.
I have one. So my first experience using stablecoins was actually the last product I worked on before we started Para was based on stablecoin peer-to-peer payments and making that accessible for emerging markets. And so the very first experience I had was basically setting up a savings program in Argentina that was stablecoin based. So this was around 2018. And what was really interesting about that time period is, of course, stablecoins, as we know now, can be an amazing way to hedge against inflation. The biggest question, though, was how do I spend these? So we were doing a lot of work with manually onboarding merchants. So this is at a university. So onboarding the different merchants and cafes to accept it. But without kind of great on-off ramps, you have to build these kind of closed systems. And so that was, I think, like a very early sort of insight and very, very relevant to a lot of the kind of problem statements that led to starting Para.
Where did that go eventually? Did that kind of see the light of day, or what happened to that?
Yeah, so the way that, so this was with Cello. And so what Cello did before the network launch was basically a series of different pop-up pilots. So one was in Argentina around saving, hedging against inflation. There were others around cash transfers, peer-to-peer payments, just like lots of different, basically like tests on the UX side. And so, yeah, eventually became Cello.
Okay, cool. What about you, Aditi? Do you have anything in your back pocket in terms of first-time encounters?
Yeah, this was around the time when CBDCs was really popular. So like there was this emerging narrative around like, what if central banks had digital currencies? What could that look like? Is that just the government spying on us? And so I was initially like using USDC to try out some DeFi apps. And what stood out to me then was like, oh, this UX is crazy because now I have USDC here and now I have to move it here and now I have to LP here. How do I do all of this? And so yeah, this was around the time when there was a really big push around this idea of what if countries could also move their treasuries on chain? Like, what would that look like on dollars? And I think a lot has changed since then. Like we've moved really past the CBDC concerns and all of that with stable coins, but a lot hasn't changed with the UX friction. So also why we're here today.
Okay, so maybe we can jump in a little bit here with just where Para is at today. What does that look like? Who's your core customer? Any kind of the basic information, and then we'll kind of follow on a little bit with how we tie that into stablecoins.
That one, Aditi?
Yeah, great. Where we're at today and what we do. Cool. So we are building a suite of wallet and auth tools. Where we're at is currently serving many customers across the EVM space, the Solana space, and seeing our approach on wallets and onboarding really resonate with ecosystems. So how we think about onboarding is, yes, of course, you should be able to easily create an account with a social login, log in with your external wallet, like a MetaMask account or a Phantom account, great. But the real friction is now that you've gone through the process of creating an account and adding funds to it, being able to use that account in different places. And it's a harder problem than it sounds. So I've just been doing a lot of work with ecosystem wallets, with people really thinking about composability. ENS comes to mind here. We power their wallet experience. So thinking a lot about how do you make that first onboarding experience really smooth and simple, but also make that balance and account be usable from different places in different chains and different ecosystems. Yeah.
That's cool. And that makes sense in terms of where UX is trending towards. You kind of don't want to have to onboard or re-onboard every time, even though that's technically not your first onboarding experience. And I feel like that, I guess maybe it's onboarding composability, so to speak, to some degree, or interoperability. I don't know what the buzzword is there, but that's pretty cool. And now I guess to expand that, how has stablecoins sat in that strategy? Has that been something that's been a part of Para from day one, or is it something that's started to become a little bit newer? Maybe it's not directly tied into the product as well. Like, curious on what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So from the start, we were very opinionated about a couple of layers where we were going to just from first principles think about what the right way to approach that infra layer was. That was really the core wallet layer. So we've built our own MPC systems, thinking about how we can support multiple different chains, the account model around that. We moved into auth shortly thereafter, the security model. These are all really important to us. Where we felt that we would love to build, but it makes much more sense to partner, is a lot that's adjacent to that. So we think about offering adjacent functionality to our customers via partners. And the biggest examples of that are account abstraction, as well as on and off ramps. With stablecoins, a lot of how we've built has sort of tended towards what are the first principles needs that users and developers have. And actually, given my background in stablecoins and Aditi's background in crypto native kind of chain building, what we've basically realized is that what you need to build a good payments network is basically what you need to build a good crypto product. So primitives like identity, primitives like being able to move value on and off chains, being able to easily do transfers, easily do contract calls for things like yield generation. All of these primitives are critical to building any good crypto experience, because this is most obvious in payments because of how sophisticated the current payment space is, in the sense where we do have yield. Well, we used to have yield on our checking accounts. Now we have high yield savings accounts. If we're lucky. But we do have all these different ways to leverage latent liquidity in Web2 that also exist in Web3. And because of that, these primitives are now useful across the board. So even in a gaming app in crypto, you might see that it's helpful to have yield generation on your deposits. And so we basically just seen that payments is everything, in the sense of what you need to build a good payments app is what you need to build a good crypto app.
Okay, I like that take. Now, in the beginning, you mentioned kind of focusing on a little bit of like the core product offering, which is kind of what we talked about before, about being able to kind of take your wallet instance over and over and over and across the web effectively, or across the chain. That seems to be kind of like the let's validate this product strategy, let's figure out what works best. And then now you have effectively potential next steps that could show its face, which seemingly could be in the payment space, could be more specifically to stablecoins, could be somewhere else. Like, what does that next step look like in terms of hotspots? Or you might even know already, but curious what's next for Para when it comes to that next feature or that next capability.
I think, Jay, you'll resonate with this. Certainly, Aditi and I have felt this, where I think in any company building journey, there's the stuff you're super excited to one day hopefully get to build. And I feel that we're there with a lot of the work around money movement, fiat on off ramps. Not that we would necessarily build all that info ourselves, but being able to, from a first principles perspective, understand what the best possible experience looks like. I think we've set ourselves up for success in terms of the one account being able to take it everywhere. So universal wallets. So being able to move liquidity that's already on chain, as opposed to deposit from the exchange for the umpteenth time. But I think what we think is most important there is now that we see so much demand for things like new users being able to move funds directly from fiat, folks needing to leverage passive liquidity, stablecoin fragmentation, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. But we're basically seeing that there are new classes of problems as the space evolves that we're uniquely positioned to solve. And so continuing to set ourselves up to deliver on the new needs that our customers have.
Any early indication of what your customers have started to communicate to you in terms of their needs? Like those are some interesting topics to definitely explore. I'm curious, like if there's anything that stands out from that list.
Yeah, a big one in this money movement realm is around basically token abstraction, and chain abstraction has been around for a long time. But generally, the problem that we're trying to solve is a user could have 20 different stablecoins in their wallet. They could have those 20 stablecoins exist across 10 different chains. How do you make sure that there's still a very clean payment experience when a user goes into a new product? And so basically making it feel more fungible from the end user perspective. Even though it is, I think, inevitable that we'll have multiple different types of stablecoins, I think these stablecoins will probably start to have different properties, but still being able to easily save whatever's in my wallet as opposed to cashing in again.
Nitya has a really good blog post on this. So I'm going to, of course, pitch the blog post, but I'm also going to share, oh no, the camera, Jay. I'm also going to share a really good anecdote she has from the blog post on in the fiat world, 1 USD equals 1 USD, and that's that. But in the crypto world, you have PayUSD, PayPal's USD coin. You also have USDC, you have USDT, and all these things. You have USDG via Paxos. All these things do different things and don't really represent one-to-one. And so what do you do now when you have all these different fintech ecosystems with all these different kinds of stable coins? And we think composability and the wallet layer plays a huge role in that world. And so it's cool to see that kind of materialize very tangibly with everything going on today.
Any initial hypotheses on where it will go from your guys' perspective?
One view I think I've had from the beginning, which for better or worse is I think maybe how it's trending, is I think there is this sort of magical crypto purist dream of like, I have one account and one wallet, and my everything I do is in this single place. But I think it's largely not zero sum at all, in the sense that I think we're going to see more and more people have a combination of different types of accounts that meet their needs. And I think the exact same thing is happening with stablecoins. So on the account side, it's very common for someone crypto native to have a ledger, to maybe have an exchange account, and to have a couple of hot wallets. Vice versa, or like kind of similarly, it's very common for someone who is holding some kind of stablecoin to have multiple different types of stablecoins. This could be because the app that you're using has issued their own stablecoin, and that gives you some better yield in that app. We are moving towards a world there, but I think the power of crypto rails is that this looks better than the Web2 versions. The Web2 version of this is I have a stack of gift cards in my wallet that I have to remember who takes what gift card. But I think we can move towards a world where I can pay with what I've got. So yes, I have 7 or 8 different stable coins in my wallet, but I can still pay for anything whenever I want with it. So I think we are trending towards a world where we're becoming more accepting of fragmentation, but reasoning much more about what do we do about that and how do we still make the user experience good.
Yeah, and I think one of the points that you touched, which is funny about our space, is trying to explain the value of stablecoins. This question gets asked over and over on podcasts, especially ours, but also everywhere else. And I think in the beginning, our industry tended to overcomplicate the sell. It was like, let's focus on, and this is cool too, of course, but composability and a little bit farther out. And you're like, well, guess what? You could actually take this and then put it into that, and then over and over and over. And it's like, well, actually, what about just saying, hey, it's more efficient than the rails that exist now? And so I feel like as a marketer, I've started to simplify the sell when I talk to people who are particularly not in the industry. I think this is where it hits the most. They're like, what's the deal with stablecoins? What's the main sell? And I'm like, first of all, don't get distracted by all these different types and technological advancements that people like to talk about. I think there are there's a spectrum of risk, of course, in the world of stables. And I think, a lot of people will probably argue or agree that USDC is probably on one side, and then there's also plenty of others on the other side. And then when you go, well, guess what? You can actually just save money first and foremost. If you're an entity, you're a user, everyone in that flow will actually save value. And I think you obviously have to give a little bit more context to exactly what that means. But I feel like that is kind of the cool base level value prop that most people that haven't been building using blockchain technology for however long we have as a collective group, I think are now starting to realize. And then to your point, it's not zero sum at all. There's plenty of runway. It's also, our market as a crypto market is only a couple trillion. That's not that big for an asset class. But yeah, that's something that we're definitely excited about at Eco. And then maybe switching gears a little bit on kind of the framing. I'm curious, what has been the most challenging part of operating at Para? Stablecoins or not, just curious kind of behind the scenes on what that looks like. Let's say, let's put a time on it, maybe the last 6 months.
Great question.
You both can have also answers too, because you might have different opinions.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
I think what we're finding with some of the fintechs and Web2 companies we chat with is a lot of them are obviously thinking about the benefits of crypto, but they're kind of struggling with building UX that's both composable and secure. And how do you balance that in a way where you're preserving the benefits of crypto, of even taking a bet on crypto as a big org, without reinventing, core primitives and like rebuilding walled gardens. And so that's been a really interesting tension that we've seen. And I think the work that a lot of these fintechs are doing to kind of do more with crypto, but do it in a way that's composable and secure. And there's like so many different projects that are kind of innovating on this recently. That's been really interesting. But I think even just the shift of, we were talking to fintechs before this and before all the stablecoin hype happened, and it wasn't really a priority. And now all of a sudden it is. And so it's just been very cool to see that shift has happened. So definitely a challenge in like that tone shifting, but it's been really cool to be able to capitalize on it with what we've built.
Yeah, I can give more of the company building side of it, which is kind of what I alluded to earlier, where a big thing that's really, really important as you're building up the company is to figure out when to focus, what problems are now problems versus what problems are shiny and exciting, but maybe not now problems. And I think that one thing that has been, I think, quite exciting about the amount of attention around stablecoins, the amount of common use cases, is just seeing a lot of things that have come that have kind of come naturally baked into the product. But I think what that's kind of said to me is just recognizing the importance of building collective intuition as a company around what kind of the right way, as Para defines it, is to build these products out. So we've done a lot of work in the last 6 months around just creating as strong of a conduit as possible between our customers, the engineers at our customers, as well as everyone on our team, whether or not they're primarily externally facing or not. And so really like building the systems of scaling feedback as like the ratio of customers to employees just has really spiked, making sure that we still have the right level of connection. Like maybe we don't have everyone on the engineering team in every single customer chat anymore, and that's a good thing, but still getting all of the insights that come out of that to the team. So we've kind of spun up a lot of new mechanics around that.
And then for context of the watchers and viewers, curious, what's the head count now?
Oh yeah, we're 10 people.
10 people. And then when did you start? When was like the last big increase?
We've grown somewhat steadily over the last year. So a year and a half ago, we were 4. And then we grew quite quickly in the 6 months after that. And then it's been more steady since then.
Okay, cool. I think the thing that you touched on, which is very common, it's a very common problem in crypto startups, but I don't think many people talk about it, nor do I think they actually focus on it, is kind of that scale and that commentary around how to actually get everybody to beat to the same beat of the drum effectively, right? And I think, to me, as kind of a quick articulation of what I think that means, I think one of the main things is culture. I think another one is a kind of purpose that's more tied to product, but also can be tied to culture a little bit. And then I think the third is also a little bit of everybody kind of contributing to both those first 2 points. Of course, it typically starts from the top down, but then also at the end of the day, you also have to have, if there's subgroups or sub teams, you have to have champions to kind of lift that team up, then to kind of then articulate that to the top, and then vice versa. And so I'm curious if there's anything that you've been doing in terms of getting everybody towards that same direction. I know you talked a little bit about like resourcing and things like that, but is there anything else that we're not necessarily seeing when we're looking at your website and things like that?
We literally talked about this yesterday on a walk, so that's why we're both smiling.
Nice.
But yeah, I think one thing that's been really interesting is when other teammates champion and take on social activities or activities for the team, those end up being really successful. And it seems like a minor thing, but when it's not top down, it's actually like way more fun, way more engaging. We end up having conversations like that aren't pre-programmed in a way. And so like just engaging and having the space to have those interactions happen has been really valuable. We're also, a lot of us are in person. So I think that also helps because we are in the office and like maybe a group goes out and like gets salads at Sweet Green and they're chatting and they come back and like there's just more opportunity for that. But that's been massive. I don't know how that's accelerated the last couple of months. Actually, I need to think about that, but it just has. And that's been a huge kind of opportunity with culture, I'd say.
I think if I were to mention why,
Yeah.
I think a lot of the team hit a level of tenure where you can just do things just kind of came into being, which was really nice. I think when the team grew very quickly at first, there was a set of folks who had been on the team for under 6 months and were, very much ramping up on their core work and like fully at speed there. But when it comes to these like extra things, like planning a social event or setting up a round table or something like that, people might be more hesitant. And I think building on that as well, one thing that we really rely on is basically setting up the automation so that we can operate at peak efficiency on the team. So we're, I'd say philosophically, we're very focused on being a small senior team. And a lot of what that means is that we build a lot of systems to scale ourselves. So we have like some pretty nice automations around things like new inbound, folks who are having issues with like if there's any bugs that people run into, basically just like building a lot of the layers so that we balance the combination of being very available and prioritizing folks who need our time. So versus maybe some questions are answered by a link in Docs, making sure those are triaged so that our team is spending time on the net new questions.
And I think one of the kind of themes that's picking up actually, which is cool that we haven't touched on yet, so I want to move on to this in a second, is the customer segments that you guys are tackling. We covered it briefly, but curious, I think this is kind of switching it from the biggest challenge, but what has been the biggest success, if there's anything that's related to your customer segments that you guys have been engaging, and what does that look like? And then maybe if there's anything in terms of opinions for what to do next with that category, curious to hear a little bit of that.
I can touch on what's been working and what we've been really excited about. And then maybe Nitya can touch on what's next. In terms of this go-to-market motion around ecosystems, that's been wildly successful. We always knew there was a market around wanting people to create accounts and use those accounts kind of cohesively, composably across different apps. But now we're finding that a lot of ecosystems are thinking about eco-wide UX and are taking a stance on what they think the UX should be. I think for so long, ecosystems protocols have been used to, funneling users through an external wallet like a MetaMask and not really being able to own that user experience directly, which presented a lot of problems where now you needed to get your users through an external wallet and then get them into your app and keep them retained. And that's a really big ask. I mean, in Web2, like building a successful app itself is hard. And now you're adding in like make an account, get through it, and be a retained user. Like that's a really just tall ask. And so it's been really, really cool to see that folks are excited about owning that user experience and like want to feel empowered with like extending their brand into that identity layer. And so that's been a hit, I'd say. And we're even seeing, fintechs and Web2 companies take a bet on composability is the way I'd frame it. So like Robinhood and all these different companies are thinking about this in this way. And so, been really, really cool to see the last couple of months.
Cool. And then
I think one quick point is, I think what's interesting there is what happens in terms of interest and also reality, right? Like like what actually does someone like a Robinhood do? Would they actually practice what they preach, or would they actually take that action, right? And so I always find that there's like lagging indicators in crypto, and sometimes they lag pretty hard. And so it's interesting, like you guys are pretty much in the forefront of a lot of these conversations, especially when it comes to wallets and also composability as it relates to that. So yeah, I guess you'll probably start to see leads, and then all of a sudden everything comes at once, and then you guys will be ready to scale too, hopefully. And so that's also cool to hear. And then, sorry, Nitya, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say to your point, like something we think a lot about is like I think one challenge crypto has had is pushing our ideology down, people's throats, whether they want it or not. And so something that we've really focused on with respect to composability and interoperability is, especially in more non-crypto contexts, framing this as a journey. So we think a lot about how a user's journey starts when they have something that needs to be associated with themselves on chain. And that could be like a signed message. It could be some assets. It could be an NFT. But whatever it is, that's the point at which that user needs to exist on chain. And then there are different points at which different sort of primitives and different capabilities become required, but not kind of forcing people to do all of it at once. And I think that's a little bit of the challenge that the MetaMask onboarding in the middle of your app has had, is we're forcing people to become fully sovereign individuals before they've bought their Taylor Swift NFT. And I think that's largely why a lot of this has fallen apart. And so thinking about how to frame this gradually, and also from the product perspective, how to build in these graduation levers as opposed to just throw it all at the user all at once. And then kind of as far as what's next, in terms of where the product and user base is at, more than 10 million wallets, more than like hundreds of teams that we support. What we're thinking a lot more around now is how do we make it as easy as possible for users to leverage the liquidity that's in these wallets. And so that's not something that we can do alone, but in conjunction with our customers, like thinking about how do we make it easier to spend assets that you might have on a different chain, or easier to leverage the identity or reputation that you've built up in a different app, and use all of that to sort of curate a better experience. And also on the app side, how do we give apps a picture of a user when they log in and already have some history? And how can that help the user unlock a better, more differentiated experience? And so just starting to go from here, it's like, well, how do we make the experience better by virtue of that user having information on chain?
Yeah, and I think the common theme there is UX, right? UX and making it easier, and therefore you can actually do more. I think in the earlier kind of right before the Taylor Swift shout out right there, you mentioned focusing on a product where you're not actually putting everything out at once, at least in the user, and actually thinking about that experience. So do you have maybe a little bit more detail on what that opinionation looks like? Like, are there certain specifics there on features, what to leave out? I'm sure there's some thoughts there.
Yeah, absolutely. So people know Para very well for having universal wallets, where wallets are accessible anywhere by default. And the way that we manage that is that a user has both their social login and then either a password or a passkey associated with their wallet. What people might not know is that we also have a version of the product that is not universal by default. And it's pure API-based wallet provisioning. So we have a server SDK and then a set of APIs that basically let apps provision wallets for users in the background. So this is used for a couple of things. One, it's used for, let's say I already have a list of users and I want to just give them all wallets. You can do that. But then you also have folks that just don't want anything in the user experience and have their default onboarding flow and just want to make an API call at some point in that user flow. What we do that's different though is we provide an upgrade path, not from these server wallets to a private key that you then have to go and put in MetaMask, but into a universal wallet. And so we have basically decoupled the experience from universal wallet to holding a seed phrase, where a user can choose at any of these points to get a seed phrase and self-custody that and kind of remember that seed phrase, or they can at any point choose to access the benefits of interop without ever having to write down a seed phrase or private key, and just leverage that through a passkey social login. So basically decoupling the kind of ideology of writing down a private key, writing down a seed phrase, from the utility of being able to access this wallet and these assets anywhere.
So a little bit of like back to basics if you think about Web2 effectively, which makes total sense. And that's, I think, where things are going towards. A few more questions before we wrap. I guess building off of that one more time would be any interesting technical components that have like enabled Para to do more or fulfill users' needs, fill a customer's needs that people might not see at first glance that could be interesting more for like the technical listeners out there?
I could take a couple of these. So first was we had very strong views initially of how a universal wallet should work. And the key management that we use, distributed MPC, is directly because of these value props that we want to provide. So what distributed MPC is it's basically a way to create a private key via distributed key generation, have two different shares that are held in different places. Without ever combining them into a private key, you can sign transactions. We've invested a ton in making the system super performant, well under half a second signing, fast key generation as well, and really coupling the performance and high performance needs of the enterprise with the security value prop of any application that's operating on this wallet doesn't see the private key ever. And that is in kind of large contrast to a number of other approaches where you might be reassembling a key in a browser, or you might have a key that's held in whole in an enclave. But basically making sure that every app has differentiated signing material. And that's really important from a security perspective, because if we think about the current state of a private key, if I put that private key in every app that I go to, inevitably one app will get hacked and I will lose my funds. What this allows is for every app to have differentiated privileges as well as differentiated key material, so that you can actually revoke access on a per app basis. And kind of moreover, that one app being compromised does not mean that funds are compromised. And so it's really a model that decouples transacting on a wallet from not owning, but having full access or having visibility to the private key of a wallet.
And I feel like that is a really cool feature, but it also, admittedly, even as a marketer, that feels really hard to communicate to the user, because you have to basically go through everything. I just need to clip what you just said and then just put that in like the onboarding flow and basically hope for the best. But also it reminds me of what I used to say in early DEXs, where to describe what a DEX was kind of when it first started was very difficult unless you actually saw the other side, like saw the negatives that can happen. So unless something catastrophic were to happen, you don't actually truly understand what value you're actually getting from using that platform, especially at the time when it's actually worse performing and slower and all those things relative to something that you're familiar with. And so I think familiarity is an interesting beast that I think most of the industry has to tackle on a day-to-day basis. I guess kind of closing out with that thought, curious on kind of where you think stablecoins are going. I think that's kind of the header, but more specifically, what's something that you're excited about in the next 6 to 12 months when it comes to stablecoins? It can also relate to what you guys are focused on, what you guys are actually capitalizing on when it comes to features. anything in that realm?
Yeah, I think deeper fintech integrations. We're already seeing this in the fintech ecosystem, but more around like API based access, like things like payouts, payments, treasuries. Like I think all of that is having a moment right now, and it's just very cool to see where it's actually going to go. Like PayPal had a really interesting launch yesterday about their new marketplace with digital wallets. Clearly, this is being thought about, with Web2 companies, and so just excited to see how far that's going to be pushed. To your point on like what is the balance between the reality and like what you're saying on on the marketing channels. And so that's I think a big thing that I'm really curious about, because obviously this all boils down to how we're thinking about our own internal positioning and our own internal, how we talk about distributed MPC and why it matters. And so from the GTM side, that's something I'm always excited about.
Nice. Yeah, I agree. And what about you, Nitya?
Yeah, I guess maybe just to jump back on the familiarity piece, like 100% agree. I think that's something that we're continuing to push on as well, is making sure that we are leveraging familiar paradigms to people. So using social logins, using pins, like passwords, like 2FA, like things that people are used to. But to your point, like I think what I'm super excited about seeing now is the space broadly has, I think, always had a bit of a legitimacy problem, if I'm being frank, when it comes to the work that we're doing and a lot of the innovations. But it's often gotten overshadowed by larger events, which I think we all are familiar with, like big scams, big hacks, like fraudulent behavior, like things that have just made the space tough to take seriously outside. I think what stablecoins are doing very uniquely is through the work of folks like you, Jay, and Aditi, and all of the marketers and growth folks in the space. I think the core utility of stablecoins is a lot clearer than anything else we've had in crypto in the past. I think probably the closest example is Bitcoin, and a sense of digital gold, self-sovereign ownership. But what I'm excited to see from that is for that adoption to be a lot more real, as opposed to more kind of dip our toes in, maybe launch an NFT project and see what happens. But the work that's happening is a lot more deeply embedded, and I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, and I think that's where we'll see kind of combination of your guys's takes a little bit and see what 6-12 months looks like. I think the other thing that Ryan, our CEO, mentioned, he talks about this a lot on podcasts actually, and I've kind of started to articulate this too, is we as a collective group no longer have to explain what a stablecoin is, at least as much as before, which is really cool. Also kind of a weird word if you really think about it. That's my personal take. Like, I think it's kind of a strange, we just invent words that start to become like even NFTs, like the fact that people say that across the board. If you asked any one of us, I'm sure 5-7 years ago, if you think that even, your grandparents or your parents would have said the word NFT, non-fungible tokens, I would have said no chance in hell, no way. Same with stablecoins. I thought it would have probably matured into something like a digital dollar, which I guess it gets used sometimes, but not like, yeah. Like I saw this headline that was like, I think it was like the Economist or something had a headline that read, what is this cryptocurrency that everybody's talking about called the stablecoin? And it's like, yeah, well, that's kind of how I feel about it actually a little bit. But yeah, will be interesting to see where that goes. And then kind of what I just mentioned before, very easy take, quick question to kind of round things out. When do you think people in the generation of our parents will start to use stable coins? Like 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, something else?
I think it's already happening. Crazy, but it's happening in the background. So actually, this happened like a couple days ago. I'm from the East Coast, and PNC Bank is now like doing something with Coinbase, where I think they're doing settlements in stable coins, or they're offering some sort of yield on stable coins. And I sent it to my parents, and they were like, oh, this is cool. Like we use PNC Bank. And so I think it's already happening. Like they have a general awareness on it. And I think that things are being silently rolled out that, and like, there's no need to even have awareness of what's happening. It's kind of just happening in the background, which is great for, people like us, because that is the future we believe in. So maybe already happening.
So that's actually a good clarification, because then it's like, okay, that's probably true. So maybe the 1, 5, 10 years doesn't work. So then maybe a quick adjustment for Nitya is like, when does it hit critical mass?
I think that the critical mass, to your point, is more of an awareness thing of, it's not the settlement, because right, like Robinhood is already doing off-hour settlement. Like,
right.
People's lives are enabled by stablecoins already, whether or not they know it. My guess is maybe 18 months. My thought is that's the point where maybe some of these US specific payments apps start to roll out international options and recognize, oh, I'm able to do this now because they added some new feature. Maybe they still don't know it's stablecoins, but being able to send peer-to-peer payments is probably, I'm guessing, how most people will realize it. Yeah, we'll have to see.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Sounds about right to me. Maybe I usually like add a little bit more to the buffer so for some optionality, but in any case, that's really cool. But yeah, this has been a great conversation. Appreciate your guys' time. If people who are watching want to catch and learn more about what Para is doing, where should they go?
Yeah, they can go to our Twitter, get_Para, P-A-R-A. You can also follow Nitya and myself on Twitter, our personal Twitters. So my handle is ADEETS_22. Our website is also a great resource, so getpara.com. And then all of our links are kind of linked there.
Amazing. We'll include it in the show notes, and thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.